You're listening to Guardians of Galen, your go-to podcast for USC Trojan basketball.
Let's get started.
Welcome back to Guardians of Galen, the podcast centered around the team that's capable of taking down the top team in the Big Ten. You heard that right. USC takes down number 7 Michigan State 70-64 to hand the Spartans their first loss since November 26 and snapping their 13-game winning streak. A statement win for Eric Musselman and company. A win that, they led the whole time. They didn't go down, and Michigan State was letting them hear it, letting them have it the whole game, pushing them to the limit. But the Trojans held on, didn't falter, led the entire game, and pick up a 6-point win, a statement win, after having a string of mixed results, of course, losing to UCLA, not really being able to have a consistent rhythm, heading into this one, splitting their past 4 games. And now, of course, this program feels on the way up. I mean, of course, it's just one win, but the Trojans did get a 5-star commit this past week. Elijah Arenas, the son of Gilbert Arenas, commits to USC, and it's big for Eric Musselman's team. Obviously, Musselman is building the team from the ground up, and so to get a statement win like this, to show the Big Ten and the country that this team is capable of pushing teams to the limit. And then, of course, picking up a guy in Elijah Arenas, who's scoring over 30 points per game right now in high school, the son of an NBA legend, and a guy who's certainly going to make waves on the USC team as it progresses towards this new era, should he sign with USC. So it was a big pickup for Eric Musselman and a very good game, I think, for the coaching staff at USC. Kind of, working tactically against a Michigan State team that, although is a very good team, is a team that tends to win games closely in the final moments. And like I said, Michigan State coming into this one hadn't lost in quite some time. 2 losses on the record coming into it against Memphis and the number 1 team in the country at the time, Kansas. And Michigan State's an interesting team. We saw it a bit tonight. They're, a very deep team. They're probably one of the deepest teams in the country, certainly the deepest in the Big Ten. They're not a team that has a bona fide number 1. They're a team that kind of shares the ball well, has a bunch of guys on the bench who can contribute. They have fresh legs at all times. And Jaden Akins, of course, their leading scorer, was talked about a lot coming into this game. And then plenty of other guys like Jace Richardson, Cohen Carr, list goes on, Jeremy Fears as well. And really, USC just kind of laid down the hammer and set the tone early. The Trojans led at one point by 15 points, and that lead, of course, dwindled away. And at times it seemed like they were going to give away the momentum too much. But at the end of the day, this was a statement win for USC. They made 7 3-pointers. That's an interesting thing to look at because obviously this team has been talked about this year as one that doesn't really thrive much from beyond the arc. But they're 7 of 22, not too bad, all things considered. And the big story today as well, Desmond Claude. Obviously, we've talked about him all year. He's USC's best player. There's really no argument against that I can really envision. But he goes down with an injury. He's limping in this game. And at that point, it's a pivotal time in the game because it looks like at that point, Michigan State's starting to come back a bit, but he only misses 5 minutes, and he ends up scoring 19 points in this game. Had a good start from the beginning, and that's something they need out of him because, of course, we saw against UCLA, he had a little bit of a slow start, and obviously the Trojans didn't win that game, but he has 19 points today on 6 of 13 shooting, 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. Obviously still needs to polish up his free throws, had a few free throw misses that looked like they could have been detrimental, but the Trojans hold on, and at the end of the day, that's a big weakness for them, free throws, but it didn't matter today. So that was big. One other guy I want to talk about, though, considering his struggles recently, Chibuzo Abo. Obviously a guy who I've talked about in the show a lot as just inconsistent. Of course, before this game, his last 3 games, he had 6 points against UCLA. He only had 2 against Nebraska, and he had 7 against Wisconsin. And so, he's a guy in the starting lineup who's expected to pull the trigger a lot from beyond the arc. And today, I felt like one thing I really appreciated about Abo, obviously he shot more threes today, 9, than he has in a long time, about almost a month. He shot 9 shots from beyond the arc. He was 2 of 9, which isn't great, but he was really mixing up his shot selection a lot. I think in recent games, we've seen Chibuzo Abo shoot 80 to 100% of his shots from beyond the arc and only hit a few of them. But as a 6'7" guard, he's versatile, and he should be able to drive inside, create contact down the lane, and he did that a lot today, and that contributed a lot of points to USC, and I appreciate what he was able to do alongside Claude, and especially, too, of course, Wesley Yates today didn't have the best game of his career. He did do well down the stretch. He played 40 minutes total. He played the entire game. He had 15 points, so I'm not going to, talk poorly about his game, but I think really, it took him a little bit to kind of get those points going, and so it was good to see Chibuzo Abo step up in that role as a guard and also use his height and length down inside. Another big note to look at is Rashawn Agee had his first career USC start today, starting over Josh Cohen, which I thought was a great look. I mean, Josh Cohen ended up playing 17 minutes off the bench, and I don't know if that was the plan going into the game. I think Cohen actually played well, all things considered, and so maybe that awarded him more minutes down the stretch. But AG didn't have the best game, but he fouled out in this game, had 5 points, 2 of 4 from the field. Not a horrible game. Obviously, you want to get more rebounds out of him. He only had 1 in the starting lineup, but I think, honestly, it's a step in the right direction, having a guy who's a pure scorer on most nights in the starting lineup to set the tone. He also won the tip-off, and he's not the tallest guy for a center, and so I think for AG, he's still growing his game. Obviously, he's a veteran on this team. He's 6'8", which is not a typical center size by any means, but Josh Cohen off the bench had some clutch points. USC had this moment in the waning moments of the second half where they were held scoreless from the field for about 5 minutes. Josh Cohen broke that drought, scoring back-to-back layups, and so he got 17 minutes in this game, had 7 points. He actually led all bench scorers, and I think one interesting thing that Eric Musselman did, which I think is honestly kind of genius, is he knew that going into this, he was going to play a Michigan State team that goes 10 deep, a team that can provide scoring off the bench, and obviously we've seen in recent games, and with injuries to Matt Noling and others, this is obviously not something they can necessarily control, but the Trojans have not utilized the bench to its fullest extent. And Musselman said, really, who cares? He played 5 guys off the bench. Not many of them contributed in that many ways, but of course having Cohen kind of be your 6th man tonight, putting in Shelley for a second, Matt Noling, Isaiah Elohim, Clark Slackert. I mean, they got guys in, they got fresh legs going, and I think that'll leave the pressure off of some of those guys in the starting lineup, like Desmond Claude when he had to go out for a moment with the injury, like Rashawn Agee, and I think that really helped. Another thing that was interesting for USC, and this was for better or for worse in some moments, but they used the shot clock a lot in this game, especially with the lead. And I think, at some points it seemed a little bit unintelligent for USC to, run down the entire shot clock on every possession, but then, put up kind of a poorly thought out shot, not really get much of a good look. But I thought it really kind of slowed down Michigan State. Michigan State is one of the top fast break teams in the country. They came into this one averaging 18.5 fast break points per game, and they can thrive so well in transition. But I thought when USC had to use the whole shot clock, it kind of slowed down that Michigan State transition attack and was very, very successful in sort of slowing them down and not being able to create much momentum of a comeback. Now, of course, like I said, USC's largest lead was 15, and Michigan State went on some runs that seemed pretty convincing. But at the end of the day, the Trojans held on. They slowed down that Michigan State offense. And I want to take a look at them for a second. Obviously, I mentioned Michigan State not really having a top star lead the way like some other Big Ten teams do, and they've thrived a lot off bench points. But the Trojans did a good job in limiting some of their top guys. Jeremy Fears was the leading scorer tonight with 12 points. I mean, all things considered, he's, not their best player. So, I don't really scoff at that too much. He also shot 8 free throws, but missed 3 of them. Akins had 11 points for them. Obviously, he's their leading scorer. Jaden Akins is a great player. Didn't have the best game. And really, besides that, the Michigan State bench did well, but their starting lineup didn't provide much in this game. So that was interesting. Also, they didn't shoot too well from beyond the arc, 5 of 15 from 3-point range. And so the Trojans had them figured out. And look, I mean, this could be a one-off game where just USC plays well and Michigan State doesn't. But I think for USC, having a week like they've had, a tough loss against UCLA, getting a commitment from a 5-star commit, and that, by the way, is USC's 3rd commit. They have 2 4-stars, Jerry Easter and Elsie Harrington, and of course bringing in Elijah Arenas. So the future looks bright for this program, and really just to get a win like this, it means so much. And I was thinking about it to myself, what was the last time USC had a win of this much importance? And I really am looking back to the 2021 NCAA tournament when USC took down number 3 seeded Kansas in the second round to move on to the Sweet 16. And obviously that was a big one. But in recent years, the Trojans haven't had that many good wins like this. They, of course, took down number 13 Illinois earlier in the year. Illinois was without their best player. I mean, it was a good win nonetheless. But there's been, plenty of moments this year that kind of look like the vintage USC Trojans, being able to fight out these gritty wins and, do what they do best and play well in transition, guard the perimeter well. I will say, the Trojans didn't space the floor super well, and I think that's a big reason why they had to use the entire shot clock. And so, that's one thing to look at. They rebounded well early on. They took a very early lead. I mean, Michigan State at the first media timeout was only shooting 20% from the floor. USC was up by 7. The point I'm trying to make, USC set the tone. Hope Desmond Claude, is okay. Obviously, he looked kind of brutal when he went down. He had to limp to the bench and looked like he went to the locker room, came back. Hopefully this is nothing that comes back, but good to see him go out there and lead the team with 19 points. Also get some rebounds as well. the Trojans and Spartans were equal in rebounds, just about. Michigan State had 34, USC had 33. That's an area that USC has struggled with this year, and you can't really blame them when you have Josh Cohen and Rashawn Agee be your centers, two guys that just aren't rebounding specialists at the 5. But of course, a huge win. And enough about this game for a moment. USC is going to head to Chicago and play Northwestern next, which should be a tough game. I mean, Northwestern is kind of a middle-of-the-road team this year. However, Brooks Barnhizer will miss the remainder of the season as of today, and he's their second leading scorer with 17 points per game. Nick Martinelli is a great player, though, and he's going to be hard to stop. But I don't think this is a guaranteed loss by any means for USC. I mean, Northwestern's 12-10. USC is 13-8. I mean, obviously, I think Northwestern has some more star power than USC, but I don't see any reason why USC can't win this game. And so Trojans will try to get back in the win column, and that should be interesting. But just a gritty, hard-fought win. I mean, this was physical Big Ten basketball. Talk about Big Ten physicality all the time. Michigan State, props to them. They're a great team. I mean, nothing against them. They just didn't play good tonight, and that was why they lost. And so they're going to play UCLA next, try to get back in the win column. They realistically could, but USC with a 70-64 win. And, I mean, Trojans have to feel good after this one. Eric Musselman has been preaching all year that this team, can be overlooked. They are not a perfect team by any means, but they have the capabilities of being a team that they go in any given day and beat top teams, and they did that today. And so a top 10 win for USC, taking down the number 7 team in the country. And I think the X factor in this is the starting guards clicking together. I can't remember the last time when Chibuzo Abo, Wesley Yates, and Desmond Claude all harmoniously played well together. I think usually 1 to 2 of them have great games, and we've seen that recently, and the third one struggles. But today, all 3 of them looked good, and that was huge today in securing a big win for USC. And I really will stand by. This is the best USC win in multiple years. And so I think USC is still building an identity, still trying to get fans out to games. And the Trojans actually had a recruiting event for the football team. So many eyes were on this game. Magic Johnson was in attendance sitting courtside. I mean, this was a big game from a spotlight standpoint and getting the Trojans put on the map. And look, I mean, the Trojans aren't a top team by any means, but they're building from the ground up. They're just trying to work out the kinks right now, and getting a big win over Michigan State when no one thought they would beat Michigan State is huge, and the Spartans go down by 6 points. So that's just about going to do it from Guardians of Galen here on this Saturday afternoon. Trojans defy all odds and get a huge win, and so they'll try to keep things going, heading to the Midwest for a game against Northwestern, then playing Purdue, and then coming back home. Let me know your thoughts on this one. As always, I'm your host, Casey Kasliner, here on Guardians of Galen. If you liked it, please drop a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.